We are going to work on the Silver Bells card making workshop that is part of our new November-December catalog. You're actually seeing on the cover of the catalog or the idea book part of the Silver Bells collection. You can see some of the paperback here that are that's part of the card making workshop. And I'm prepping for my holiday card buffet. And so I thought I would go through and show you kind of some tips and tricks about using the card workshops, and then how I'm actually going to level up this particular card workshop with some other papers or some other techniques. So it's kind of going to be a two-parter. One is about just the workshops themselves and how to use the workshops, but then how could you level up the workshop? So I'm going to turn to the card making workshop pages here within the catalog, and these cards they're I think some of my favorite cards that I've seen us come out with our card making workshops recently. I just think the sophistication of these cards are just above and beyond, and I think they're just a gorgeous set of cards that you could send out for the holidays. Again, the card making workshop gives you 4 different cards that you will make with the card making materials, and there'll be a total of 16 cards that you can make from the paper that is provided within the card making workshop. It also includes some embellishments like the silver sparkles and the cards, both the standard cards and the slimline cards, as well as a stamp set and thin cuts, which you can see up here. So again, really usable sayings and phrases, as well as fun die cuts that you can use. All right, so that's what we're going to work on. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, or when I wanted to talk about, was our actual card making instructions. So anytime you buy a workshop with Close to My Heart, whether it's the card making one or whether it's the scrapbooking workshop, you will get a set of instructions in the kit. And these instructions are going to talk about the materials that you need, the blocks, and then it will show you a picture of the 4 cards. Again, these are the 4 cards, and the stamp and thin cut that come with it. When you turn the page, it's going to give you the instructions on the cutting. And that's kind of what I wanted to go through. I wanted to walk through the instructions for the cutting, because sometimes this can be a little bit confusing. And in fact, I made a mistake. And so I thought that I would walk through just some ways that you can use this. The first thing is understanding the key and understanding what some of these things mean. So the first one I want to point out is the scissors. The scissors on these are telling you where to make the first cut in the project. Okay, so the first cut. So in this case, if you take a look at this one, the first cut is this first dimension that is on this 2C item. And that is 5.5. So you were going to cut at 5.5. And then you would cut these 2 half-inch strips first. Then you would cut the paper at 4. So the first measurement is the first cut that you want to do when you're looking at this. So 4, and then you would cut this into 2 pieces of 5.25. And this is where I made my mistake. I accidentally cut this first one at 4 instead of at 5.25. So I made a mistake. I'm not really going to be able to fix the mistake, because if you look at the paper, it's mostly being utilized. So I'm going to have to do a little paper piecing here. The second mistake I made is I didn't cut these pieces here before I cut these 2 pieces. So again, I was distracted. I wasn't paying attention. The old adage, measure twice, cut once, would have been a good idea for me here. So I'm going to have to play around to get these 2 additional strips of 1/2 inch. The other thing that I want to point out is that the asterisk that's sitting next to the 2C is also important to note. What that means is that you are actually going to be using the backside of this two-sided paper. So when you cut this, the orientation is important. You need to make sure that your orientation is correct. Now, the initial pattern, the pattern that you're cutting on the front, is a random pattern. You don't need to worry about where you're cutting. But when you flip it over, this does have an orientation. It has an orientation this way, not this way. See, if you cut this, it's going to look funny. So it's showing you on the bottom here the orientation that you want to make sure you're cutting. So you want to make sure when you come in to cut this that the pearls are going horizontally. All right. The last thing I do want to point out with cutting is when it comes to cardstock. On the cardstock, there are going to be some pieces of cardstock that you're going to use the dark side for, and some pieces that you're going to use the light side for. The dark side is what it's saying that you do these cuts with. And so you've got a 1/4 inch cut and a second 1/4 inch cut to make these 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch pieces that are going to go on card 2. The second one, again, you see has an asterisk 4C. That means you're going to use the light side. Whenever I'm cutting cardstock, I am going to flip my paper over so that I'm cutting on the side that's going to be showing. And the reason I'm doing that is that when you cut the cardstock, there is going to be a little bit of an edge here that shows up. And it's really hard to see. You can't see it too well. But that's going to be a little bit more raised than the side that you're cutting on. And so by flipping it over, I'm putting that edge, that slight edge on the back side so that it doesn't show on my card. Again, not critical. It's not the worst thing, but it is going to just give you just a slightly cleaner card look. The paper's just going to be slightly cleaner. All right, so before we get into cutting, what I want to do is I want to talk about how do I organize these. Now, you can go and write all of these on the backs of the paper, the side that you're not going to be using, so that you know which card that they go to. And you can create piles. But if you remember my live from a week ago, you might have realized that I actually have a super small space. And I'm meaning micro. I'm not talking just small, micro space. So I have essentially what you're seeing pretty much as my desk surface as my space. And in fact, I made a mistake and I ended up getting some on a piece of cardstock that I cut, right? So my space is super, super tiny. So what I do is I actually take for my cards, I actually take 4 envelopes and I just write in the upper right-hand corner the card number. This is where the stamp is going to go. So when I erase it, it's not really going to show. The stamp is going to cover up anything that I put there. And so I label them 1 through 4. And then as I'm cutting the pieces, I put those pieces for card 1 in the envelope. So for all 4 cards, I've got my pieces that I need. I've got my cardstock and then any of the patterned paper that I need. Now I haven't cut all the patterned paper yet because I want to go through cutting with you directly. All right, so that's how I organize myself and hopefully how I keep my space somewhat tidy and I don't lose pieces. So with that, I'm going to get my cutter out and we are actually going to cut this second piece of patterned paper so that I can walk through, again, the process of using the right side and the wrong side and how I do my cuts. Cutting the paper, again, we are going to be following the diagram for this second piece of cardstock, or not cardstock, of patterned paper. So we have a couple of cuts that we're going to do on the side that is the ornaments, and then you'll notice that this one says 1B, which means that we're going to be using the back of this paper. So as I said before, the orientation is important, but the first thing we need to do is cut off our zip strip or our branding strip here. And what I want to do is I want to lay this in at a 1/2 inch, bring my trimmer down, and then I can adjust. It's not always a 1/2 inch. So you kind of have to play around sometimes to trim this up, and that's essentially what I'm doing. Is I'm just trying to get a smidgen of this branding strip or this zip strip showing where my wire is on this particular cutter, and then I can take that off. Now sometimes it leaves a little bit of extra. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to set this aside for the moment. Okay, so then the orientation is where it becomes important. So I want to make sure that my pearls on the other side are going horizontally as I'm doing my cuts. So I know now that I am going horizontal, so I can make my first cut, which is going to be at 2 inches. My scissors right there is going to be at 2 inches. And so I'm going to come into my trimmer here at 2 inches, and I'm going to make that cut and set this aside for the moment. My second cut is 5.5, so I'm going to come up here to 5.5, and we're going to make that cut. And then I have to make another 5.5 cut here. And that's going to leave me with a little piece left over. So I might just double check. I did 5.5. I did. Okay. So those are 2A. Now, if remember, I have my envelopes. So I'm going to go to my envelope number 2, and I'm going to drop these 2 pieces into that envelope. That way I know that they're in the right envelope for the right card, and I won't lose them on my desktop. All right, so I need to do that a second time so I can get my other 2 cards. So again, coming in, double checking the orientation is correct. So again, double checking that orientation here is correct. We're going to come in at 2, and we're going to do that cut, rotate it, do a 5.5, and a second 5.5. That's an extra piece. And again, these go into 2. Now I have a choice with these next set of cuts. This next set of cuts, it says 1B, but it has an asterisk, so it's saying that I need to, I'm going to be using this side. Now remember, I said that when you cut, you kind of get an edge. So you can come in and you can actually cut it on this on the correct side, on the side that is going to be showing on your card. And this cut is 3.5 by 4.25. So 3.5 is my first cut, my first set. So bring that down, cut that. And then my second cut is going to be 4 3/4. So again, just rotating it, 1/4 to 4 3/4, and then do a second cut at 4 3/4. All right. So now those go into card 1 here. So again, going into my numbered card 1. Okay, so I'm going to just double check. This is now 3.5 is going to be my next one. What I'm trying to decide is, I made a mistake again. I needed something that was 5.5 here, which I'm not going to get because I should have cut this at 7, and then I could have gotten my 5.5 strips that I missed over here. But I didn't do that, so we're going to just make do. So I'm going to make some adjustments to some of these as I'm going through. All right, so again, first cut is 3.5. And then again, rotate it, and I'm going to do 4 3/4. All right, so again, these go into card envelope number 1. And I do have some excess that I can put aside. The last thing I need to cut are my zip strips. So I haven't cut my zip strips yet, and I need 4 zip strips, and they're 3.5 by half. So each one of these zip strips is roughly 1/2 inch wide. So we're just going to go in at 3.5, and we're going to make 3 cuts for this one. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, and we have a little bit of extra. And then I have the zip strip from that first piece of paper that will give me my last 3.5 inch cut that I need, piece that I need. All right, so now I've got those, and those will go into card envelope number 4. So those are part of 4. All right, so we've now got all of our cutting done, and we have all of our envelopes assembled. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with you about how we can level up these cards from the design that's here, and how you might be able to take them to another level with some really simple techniques. So how can I level up these cards a little bit from what was designed? So what was designed, again, as I said, I think they're absolutely gorgeous, right? I think they're really great cards. But they did just use plain cardstock. Okay, so when we're looking at it, they used rosemary cardstock, they used toffee cardstock, and they used mink cardstock. And so you've got these really pretty outlines of bells and ornaments, but it's just cardstock. And I thought, well, geez, they should be shiny. How can I make them shiny? What did I have that I could use that could make these maybe even pop even more off of this card and make them even more dramatic? And it's not that these aren't great. These are perfectly fine. They look great just as they're designed, but I thought I could maybe make it just one notch better. So I went into my stash, and what I knew I had left over was our old silver foil paper and our gold foil paper. Both of these, unfortunately, are retired, and we don't have them in stock anymore, but I knew that I had them in my stash, and some of you may have it in your stash too. So I thought, okay, these would be great. We also had a copper ore paper a number of years ago. If you have that in your stash, that might also look nice. And then I went in and found my glitter paper, and I have a bunch of glitter gold paper and silver paper. And I thought, well, that would also look nice for the toppers that are to go on top of these ornaments, or on top of the bell possibly. So I cut out some of those. So like I said, I just went into my stash and I looked for silver paper to replace the mink paper and the toffee paper. Didn't really have anything that I could replace the green or the rosemary paper with, but I definitely could use these other two for that. Okay, so that was option number 1. That was sort of a very fast and easy option. Then my second thought was, okay, maybe I can use liquid glass, and I could apply liquid glass on top of the papers. This one, even though it's nice and shiny, I don't really like how it has to get applied. It looks gloppy. It's not smooth or clean. Maybe it would have been better on the bell, but I didn't think it looked great on the ornament, and it was kind of messy and problematic. So I kind of said, okay, liquid glass not going to probably work in this case for what I wanted. It didn't turn out bad. I just decided I didn't like it. All right, so then I thought, okay, well, I've got embossing powder. I've got silver embossing powder, I've got gold embossing powder, and I have clear embossing powder. And so maybe one of those would work. And I think that the silver, and this is on top of mink paper, But you could do it on top of White Daisy. You wouldn't have to do it on top of Mink. Almost is very similar to the silver paper that I used. So again, if you have Versamark ink and embossing powders, you can do heat embossing and sort of get the same idea as the papers that I had. Thought we'd go ahead and try the clear on the on this particular ornament, because again, I don't have a colored paper that would replace this particular paper, so I thought it'd be fun for us to try that with the clear embossing powder. So we'll do that next. The last one is taking stickles, and this is the platinum stickles, and this should be in stock right now with us because we had it on special, I believe, last month. Might even be on for this month as well. But the platinum stickles, I just added to, this is on the Mink paper as well, and you can see it kind of shines. This one, it kind of bent up a little bit as it dried, but this one was a little bit easier to apply than the liquid glass, and it gives you that shine and sparkle that an ornament might have. And so I thought, okay, well, that might work as another alternative for this, just using the standard cardstock. And then looking through my stash of other items. So I did like that. So really only the liquid glass didn't work well, in my opinion. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to show you how I did the embossing, and we can see how that's going to work against the rosemary cardstock that we have here, and see how that looks. And all I need is I need a piece of paper so that I have some place to put my my embossing powder, so that I can put it back in my canister. So I'm going to just open this up, and really simply I'm going to just put this down onto my Versamark pad and just take my tweezers, and essentially I'm going to just go all the way around. I'm going to just try and get the Versamark ink, which is a ink that is slow drying versus our dye-based inks. And I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting good coverage with this to make sure that I am going to get enough of the embossing powder to stick. Now I'm going to be putting a topper on this one, so I don't really need to worry about this top part getting Versamark ink on it, and I'm just seeing if I've got good ink coverage, and I'm pretty happy with that. So we're going to get this nice and covered, covering this whole thing. Again, you can use anything as your container to dump it into. And we're just going to make sure that we have good coverage. Tap off. And then get this embossing powder back into its container. And close that up. All right, so now we're going to take our heat gun. And remember, you do want to use an embossing heat tool, so I'm using the Ranger one. And we're going to let this warm up for a second. Hopefully this isn't going to be too noisy. This one's pretty quiet. I'll speak up a little bit, but you want to let it warm up a minute before you start hitting your project. And once you do that, then it should melt this embossing powder pretty quickly. And that looks pretty done. Yep, that was quick. All right, so hopefully you can see the shine on that now. Hopefully the light is catching it and you can see the shine. So take that away like so. And I think that is a really good option to make the rosemary paper kind of be similar to some of these if you want to stick with the color combination that they've done in the original design. And I think it works a lot better using that than liquid glass. If you compare the two, this is nice and clear. It's even, whereas this one's pretty messy and gloppy. It's hard to tell, but it's pretty messy and gloppy when you look at it. All right, so 3 options here that are available for you that I think work really well. One is just using the silver and gold or glitter paper, using embossing powders, whether it's the silver embossing powder, the gold embossing powder, clear embossing powder, using that, or using the stickles as a third option. This one you have to let dry. You gotta make sure that you let that dry really well, because if you're not careful with it, it will end up on your fingers or on a piece of paper that you're working on. So just make sure that your stickles is super dry. But I think either the paper, the foiled paper, or the embossing powders is probably the best way to go. All right, so we're going to come back and I'm going to assemble a card so you can see what it looks like with this with these papers that we just leveled up. All right, so I'm going to show you how to assemble card 1 and walk you through the process of using, again, our workshop kits to create either cards or scrapbook pages. The way they have our workshops laid out is almost exactly the same. So when I turn to the page for making card 1, it gives you the example, and then it gives you a diagram for some prep work that you need to do, and then it gives you another diagram with the assembly, with all of the dimensions that you need, and then the pieces of paper 1A, 1B, 1C that you need. So you're always going to start with the prep work, and it's going to tell you that you need your white daisy 1C here. You're going to need charcoal, rosemary, and toffee ink. You're going to create background color with toffee ink and a blending brush, and roughly it's going to be a 1/2 inch in from the left and a 1/2 inch down from the top. You're going to load that brush with ink by rubbing the bristles on the ink pad, applying the ink to the cardstock in a gentle circular motion. So that's the first part. Then we're going to stamp these individual pieces from the stamp set in what looks like we're going to do rosemary and toffee. Again, these are going to be toffee, and then we will do some assembly. So I'm just double checking here, and then this the saying is in the charcoal, so the leaves and the berries, and then the saying in charcoal. So the 3 colors: charcoal, rosemary, and toffee. All right, so I'm going to set that off to the side. I have pulled out both the bell that we did, I did as an embossed bell, and I did with the silver paper. So I'm going to decide which one I want to use once I get to that point. And just so you know, when I die cut all of my pieces, they generally will go in their own individual bags, because I usually die cut more than are required for the projects that I'm doing. If I'm in die cutting, I'm just going to go and do as many as I think I might want, so that I can mix and match or exchange or whatever. So the smaller pieces are in this bag, and the larger pieces are in this other bag. So I'm going to just set those aside. All right, so we need to find our 1C piece of paper, and again, that's going to be in our envelope for 1, and you can see it's this piece of paper here. And this is the one that I messed up. This is the one where I got stickles all over it. But guess what? I can flip it over to the other side, and it's a nice clean piece of paper, and no one will ever know that I made the mistake, and I can still use that one. And then I've got my other pieces here that were also a mistake. So the this paper here where I cut it wrong. And then we have our piece of rosemary paper that are going to be part of this. So again, I'm going to pull all of those out of my envelope, and the other ones I'm going to stick back in my envelope and set aside because I'm not going to use any more than that. All right, so those we'll set over there. The last piece is we've got our card base, and our card base is also going to be used after we do our prep work. So we'll just set that aside. Okay, so taking a look at this card base, we need to use our toffee ink, and we need to create this shadow or background for the bell to sit on. So I'm going to grab my blending brush that's for my toffee, and we're going to open this up and we're going to do some blending. So we're going to come in about 1/2 inch from the left side and about 1/2 inch down. Now, if you wanted to, you could get your Versamat out, or you could take your ruler and you can see that 1/2 inch is right about here. And then if you did a measurement here, 1/2 inch is right about there. Again, I'm going to just kind of eyeball it where I think I want it. The other thing that you could do from a placement perspective is you could take out the stamp set and take out the individual pieces and kind of lay them where you think you want them. So this is another option if you wanted to do more of a visual of where you want to place it. So you can take this, lay it down, take the holly berries, lay those down, and the berries here. Like so. And again, these are going to kind of layer on top of each other, but you can kind of get an idea of where you might want to place your circle. Okay, so a couple of different ideas there for how you might get your centering or your placement. Again, I'm going to come in very lightly into my my pad, and then I'm going to tap off. And then I'm going to come in, I'm just loading the bristles, and I'm going to tap off. The reason I'm going to tap off is then I won't get harsh lines. I won't get harsh circles. So, and then I'm going to come in really lightly to start, because you can always add, you cannot take away. All right, so it's important that you start light with a light touch, and then you can layer up. Now that I kind of have my placement, I'm going to go ahead and put these guys back on their carrier sheet. So that they're not in my way. And we're just going to keep layering color on. And we want it darker in the center and lighter as it goes out. And this will dry pretty fast because, again, it's dye-based ink. Just trying to get a little bit more to the outside, a little bit more of a halo effect on both sides. All right, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So once I'm good with the amount of color that I have, I can now work on the stamping part. So I'm going to get out my blocks, and we're going to start working on the stamping. And I'm going to see which block's going to be the best size of the ones I have here. So when I'm stamping, I'm going to make sure that I'm using my my insert that is the foam insert, so that when I stamp I can get a really clean image. And we're going to start first with this vine. I don't think it's holly, but start with that, and that's going to be in rosemary. So we're going to pull out our rosemary. I'm going to season this up by just rubbing it on my hand or my arm to get the finish off of it, so it's got a nice clean surface to work on, or not clean, but a surface that can grab the ink essentially. Again, I can also practice and make sure that I've got a good image going on just by taking a piece of scrap paper, and we are going to trying to get over it so I can look at where it is. I think we're going to put it right about there. Leaving it there gently will allow the ink to soak into the fibers of the paper, and this will make the image a little bit stronger. So it is a good idea just to let it sit there for just a moment or two and let that ink sink into the paper. Okay, the next one I'm going to do is actually going to be the toffee, because I'm going to do that, this one here, that's more of the berries. And we're going to put that, it just kind of barely fits again on this block, but we'll make that work. So we're going to ink that up, bring in our paper, that looks good. And then we're going to add this right about there. I think that looks good. Okay, cool. Now the last one is going to be that holly berry, or the holly itself. And we'll get that on the block. Again, first time I've used it, so we're going to season it up. Oh, gotta change our ink. Now we're going back to rosemary. Test it. Looks pretty good. Again, the line stamps are usually pretty easy to season up. It's the solid stamps that tend to have more of a problem. And then we're just going to put this holly berry so it's overlapping those two there at the top. Just like that. All right. So that is the top part. Now we're going to stamp the saying. So that's going to be in the charcoal. So we'll pull that color out. And we're going to do Christmas bells are ringing. And I need a bigger block for this saying. We'll pull that off the carrier. And sometimes with these, I actually like to lay it down. And I'm working on my all-purpose mat, and this actually works really well, but by laying it down, I can get it straight on my block and pick it up from there. And then I can, and actually you couldn't see that because I was off camera, so let me do this again. So I lay it down, and it works really well if I do it on my all-purpose mat because it won't stick. And then I just make sure that I'm straight when I lay it down. And then when I pick it up, I know that it's a fairly straight layout. And I'm doing overhead, so that one didn't turn out quite as straight as I wanted it. So we'll try again. That looks better. Okay, so now we're going to put our Christmas bells here. And again, season it up if you haven't used it. Ink it up. I'm going to test this one out because I definitely want my saying to be really crisp and clean. That looks good. So we'll re-ink this and make sure we're fairly straight. And I can look down and make sure that I've got good ink coverage on this before I actually stamp it. And With line stamps, you don't want to push too hard, otherwise they'll bleed out, or they'll push out, the stamp will spread, and it will cause the spreading of the ink. But you do want to just make sure that you're, again, keeping it there and giving it a chance to let the ink soak in. And that turned out great. That looks perfect. Exactly what I wanted. All right. Now that we've done the stamping, we'll put away our stamp pads so we don't accidentally put our hand in it and mess things up. And we'll put away our stamp, and we can now move on to the next step, which is applying our bell. So our bell, again, either one of these bells will work. I think they're both equally the same. If you look at them, there's hardly a difference. This just looks like a little bit more textured versus this one. I'm going to go ahead and just use the paper. And in this case, I am going to use some thin 3D foam tape. Well, I don't have any thin 3D foam tape, so not at least on my desk at the moment. So we will use the thick 3D foam tape instead. All right, so we're going to take some of the foam tape, trim up some pieces to put on this bell to give it some elevation. Again, just to give it some dimension on the card. I tend to use thin 3D foam tape on cards, but again, it's you can use either. It doesn't matter. All right, so we are going to take this like so, and we're going to place that where we can in the center. Hopefully we can kind of get it centered here. All right, that looks good. And then we've got this little sprig, which is one of the die cuts out of toffee, and so I have that in my little bag here. So we're going to grab one of those to add. And, oops, I got one extra one. I got one for a different card in there. Put that away. And we're going to put a little bit of glue on this one. So this is pretty small to use a tape runner. So I'm going to just take up a little bit too much. I'm going to just take some Tombow glue or any kind of liquid glue that you have, just to use that. I'm going to take my tweezers and grab this, and then I want to stick it underneath this, just like so, and then tap that down like that. All right, so that is where I'm going to stop for the moment, and then we're going to go ahead and do the assembly of the card itself. All right, so I'm going to grab my card, and when you work with our card bases, you will see that there is a hill or a mountain, and there is a valley. You want to fold towards the mountain, not towards the valley. Okay, I know it's counterintuitive, but it actually makes them fold better if you fold towards the mountain. And then what you want to do is you want to take a bone folder and you want to flatten it so you get a nice flat card. And hopefully, mine was a little bit off there. I'm going to do that again. And you will have a nice thin clean card that opens and closes. So now we're going to do our assembly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 1A, and we're going to take our, in this case, you could use liquid adhesive for this. I find tape runner to be easier. So we're going to adhere this, creating a border around the edge of the card, the white border. And if you remember, I made a mistake with this piece. This piece is actually too big. So let me just double check that I have the right measurements here, because maybe I measured everything wrong. No, that one is correct. So this one is the one where I had cut it 4 by 4. So I need to actually trim this down to, let's go back to the measurements here because I didn't trim it down. That should be 3.5 by 4 3/4. Is that right? I think I did that. I think I put the wrong one in there. So hold on, let me just double check. Did I have 4 of these in here? I did. Okay, this goes to card 3. So this was in the wrong envelope. All right, so we'll pull that guy out. We don't have to fix that one. I'll have to fix that one on card 3. All right, so going back, we're using the back side. So we're using, again, these pearls. And I want the pearls to be, so there's 2 directions. One is sort of going in a downward way and one is going in an upward swing. I want it to go in the upward direction. So again, just double checking your orientation and trying to make sure that this reveal is the same. And then we're going to put this down next. And you could pop this up if you wanted to. You could add this thin 3D foam tape on top of this if you would like. And just trying to, again, try and make sure that we've got it even across there. All right, so now we've got that. And then the last thing we have is our embellishments. What are we going to embellish with? And I did pull out the Silver Bells dots because I wanted to look at these and see if I liked them as part of this. And I actually think I like these a little bit better than the silver ones. So I'm going to go ahead and use these instead of using the silver ones. Again, personal preference. You can use exactly what's in the kit, in the workshop that they give you, or you can adjust based off of what you like, what you have in your stash or how you like it. So we're going to put one right there in the middle of that bell, and then we're going to use, can't tell if those are medium size or small. These might be the small ones. Let's use the small ones. So we're just going to put these 2 guys down here. Just like that. And there you go. You have the completed card. This is going to be my sample card for my workshop. So this one will go with the instructions so that they know how to make it. But again, this kind of gives you a really great idea of how these cards go together. When I go to card 3, which is the one where I had the issue with the piece of paper, I'm going to have to do some paper piecing to make this work. So that's that will be something that I'll do on my sample card again, so that the cards that my customers make are clean and pretty and don't have a piece of paper kind of cut in half there. And I might put some shimmer trim to cover it up, or some other ribbon maybe to cover it up as well. All right, so hopefully that was helpful in how to use our workshop kits, how to take a workshop kit and level it up a little bit by using different papers or different techniques like embossing, heat embossing, or using stickles, or some other way of making these just to be a little bit on the next level up. The last thing that I'm going to do, which I just remembered that I forgot, was on these little berries, I think I'm actually going to take my stickles and I'm going to go ahead and add my stickles to these berries. to give them just a little bit of shine. Now you always want to do stickles last because you need to set it aside and let it dry. And so you want to make sure that you don't touch it or move it, because otherwise it's going to be a mess. All right, hopefully you got something useful and that how you could take this and move this to the next level. And if you like this video, feel free to hit the like button, and I would love to have you as a subscriber as well. Anyway, have a great one, and I'll see you on the next video.